how does your demand act within the year, right? Monthly, daily, and hourly. And those are the things we did in that. So let's go and look at, I'm going to get off of this for just a second. I want to go back and examine Ninth Ortho's data just a little bit. Right, that's good. There we go. This is, for that data set, Ninth Ortho's data. So this, you know it's small, this is Sunday, going through to Saturday. Distinct changes within an overall expectation of 6,714 patient days, right, on a daily basis. This is one of those units that has a significant amount of variability around the mean. As you can see functionally, mean here is 16.55 all the way up to a 24 and higher. And that's just the average. The absolute goes as high as the capacity of the unit at 33, and the min was 3 in the data set. So anywhere from 3 patients to 33 on this unit around this staffing pattern. Okay? So it's really important that you understand how your data and demand patterns are behaving. Now, one caveat I want to give you is you build these functionally. This is an entire year's worth of data, right? When you're building a 6-week schedule, we're going to build a 6-week schedule beginning now for July 16th on for the next 6 weeks, right? And I've showed you the overall in this is where they're really busy certain periods of the year, kind of slower in other periods of the year. If July and August for this unit is a really busy time of year, would you want to compare that against historical trends in the same time frame? Or would you want to compare it to the whole, which may be overall less, or another period? What if I compare it to, say, March and April when they're really slow, but they have the same pattern, but they have overall less ADC on average? What would happen? I'd understaff the units. And vice versa, if I compare a busy period or a slow period to a busy period, I'm going to overstaff the unit fundamentally. So don't forget, as you're looking at 6-week periods, look at that comparable data set, particularly if you're trending up overall, or if you have lots of seasonal or secular variation throughout the course of the year. Okay? That's very important. What else do we need to look at? What else did I give you in the data? Your discharges and admits. Why is that important? We're live of the bunch this morning. Why is that important? Because it's a workload issue above base census. Yeah. If you have enough admission and discharges that you need an admit discharge nurse, when are you going to use them? In some instances, Ninth Ortho has one. But the other thing that you can determine, and we're going to talk about heterogeneity here in a minute, but we also have information about overall workload coming to us that'll be more discrete for us seeing. Generally, on most units, is there more overall activity? Take discharge and admits out of it. Put that aside. Is there generally overall more activity during the day at night or night? During the day. Because they're going for procedures, they're going for CTs, they may have additional procedures you don't normally do at night, and then we're doing the expected normative care overall at night, right? So overall, the workload may be a little bit higher during the day than at night, potentially. We need to understand that a lot better than we currently kind of do statistically, because what can you do with that? What's one of those feels sometimes? Feels pretty good at night sometimes, and you struggle a little bit during the day around those issues, around your staffing patterns. So if you understand that very discreetly, could you in theory safely move FTEs around to accommodate that issue? And still maintain what you need to at night, your safety, quality of care, everything we need, but then be more accommodating of that workload issue. That's the whole premise of looking at admit and discharges as well. Particularly though, if you don't currently have an admit discharge nurse and you can show a rate that is supportive of adding that FTE on, particularly in some of the high volume turnover areas that we have around med-surg and some of the other areas. So that's why we look at admit and discharge.
Hello.
I'll turn this upside down.
Hey, who are you actually sitting with?
There. Okay? So what does this tell me over the course of the year? Because one of the kind of, as we looked at this unit as an example, one of the anecdotals, we followed a couple of floor nurses. One of the anecdotals was that we're real busy at night, and we get a lot of patient admits and discharges at night. That's what we heard from the nurse. We looked at what it was. Does this data back that up overnight? Because this is an entire year's worth of
No.
data.
It does not. Wait, 01, it's the 24-hour clock.
Yeah, oh, this is midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m.,
It
so
does
on and so
not.
forth.
The nurse, that nurse.
So literally, at 4 a.m. in the course of a year, they had 1 or 2 admissions. Okay? So this is the power of looking at these issues. Tracy's data is an example. What's your highest hour of admit? Oh, Magnolia, 6 a.m. Why is that on her unit? Because she has pre-scheduled procedures. That may occur in some of your other areas. So then you ask that question, how do I accommodate that? Because, for instance, when I was doing analysis work for Women's Services when I first came here, we had the same issue. And there were delays in getting patients, and there were complaints by physicians because the patients weren't prepped and ready to go for their procedures because you didn't have enough labor to help do that because of the volume of people coming in at the same time that had to be gotten ready to go, right? So how do you accommodate that issue? How do you understand whether it shifts day to day so that you can adjust the hours of your admit or adjust the hours of other labor to help accommodate that? Make sense? Same way with discharge process.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well,
So let me switch gears again.
I want to speak with her.
Okay? So what do I mean by step 2? So we understand our patterns. We've understood everything about our monthly, our hourly, our admit and discharge, our daily. What do I mean by heterogeneity of our patient population? What does, in Ninth Ortho's budget, in your budgets, what does a work standard of 11.409 hours per patient day really mean?
Hours of the bedside, direct patient.
That's an average. It's a ranked comparative average. That's where we get it. We look at like size and we do that benchmarking process. But fundamentally, what does it really kind of assert? That the average of your overall patient load is 11.409. We know factually that some patients are going to require less care, some patients are going to require more care. But do we truly know statistically and discretely exactly what that mix is? We soon will, because that's part of what Acuity is designed to help you understand. And that is very helpful. Because what is the problem with this from y'all's standpoint? It makes an assumption that you're actually on target for that. So what happens when that acuity mix changes? Or it's different? Or it's different from the beginning relative to the standing, or it changes throughout the course of the year. If it goes up, overall acuity goes up, and the workload relatively goes up, or your mix changes, you're going to understaff, like you said, right? Or vice versa, if it changes and goes down for whatever reason, which doesn't usually happen, you could inadvertently overstaff, right? So you have to understand the heterogeneity of the patient population. So we'll get to that in a second. I'm going to show you that. You got to understand and prepare to adjust for intra-year demand pattern changes. Again, that goes back to your data. Looking at every updated period in the same way as we've done with our initial data sets and the pivot tables to be sure you don't have a shift. Now, what's the big shift in ortho right now? Overall, decline in volume, right? So they start out with an ADC of 18 on this budget, FY18 budget. Where do you think they are right now? around 16, 15.5 to 16 right now. So they've seen a continual decline. What happens? You're inherently overstaffing all the time. There's no way you can hit budget unless you make those adjustments. And that can happen the same way. You could start out with an ADC of whatever, we'll use your unit, because you're looking at opening your beds to accommodate what's going on. You start out with 12, you're looking at going to 16, I think. Why does that happen? What's the timing of that? How are you going to plan for that kind of thing, right? Okay. And then, once we've understood all of this, we calculate the workload. We're going to get to that in a minute. We're going to work through the worksheet. I'm going to show you step by step how to calculate exactly what you need. So units of service, we've talked about the heterogeneity of the patients. Have we historically had this ability at Palmetto Health? No, we're kind of spitballing.
Right.
We just
Try
kind of,
different
I
things,
think,
different
generally, try to get right. If somebody challenged us, is there any way we could ever defend our assertions? No. Okay? But you do need to understand it, because we know that how sick a patient is directly proportional to the amount of work involved for that patient. And the types of procedures that are going on, types of interventions, types of assessments, and so forth that are going on. So let's talk about Ninth Ortho. And this is fictitious data. I made this up to prove a point and to show you how this works. Ninth Ortho is budgeted for 76,600 hours, right? So on the left-hand side is an assumption of their budget breakdown and their acuity breakdown, 1 to 5, and how many patients got fit into that, okay? Now what do you see that's kind of weird about the average hours of care for Ninth Ortho?
They're the same.
They're the same, because we treat every patient fundamentally by that average the same to get to the overall. But what if, in fact,
Oh, wait.
we knew that based on acuity levels,
Okay, that's.
these were the actual hours of care associated with that. So in this area, an acuity of 5 is actually 19 hours of care in a 24-hour period. That could feasibly be very feasible in some units, right? Acuity of 4, 15.2, and so forth. So when you actually apply actual discrete acuity or hours per patient based on that acuity, how many hours do you come up with? So over here, the standard is 11.409. Based on heterogeneity, the actual standard could be 12.45. This is part of the current fundamental issue around budgets, is that, and this is why we brought acuity apart, is we really don't understand to an extent this disconnect one way or the other. This helps us to do that, helps you as manager. So when you get that budget, you know that you're going to have enough hours to be able to do what you need to do based on objective criteria about acuity. Okay? And does this shift at any point in time for any reason? So we can measure it, we can periodically remeasure it, recalculate, to be sure that we're still on track throughout the course of the year.
That was my question. Are you gonna do this, will they be able to do this quarterly, like,
I pull it in.
looking at the budget?
I pull it anytime I want.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I just had the situation happen on my step-down unit, where my hours per patient day got decreased by 3.7. We just had to initiate a new staffing grid. So I'd be real interested in knowing, first of all, based on what you just said, they made that decision based on data from like facilities.
I don't, honestly, that decision, I don't have the data.
Okay, but that would be what they would, how they would.
They're looking at the totality of everything,
Okay.
that's correct, yes.
So with the new acuity system, it could prove that really we need more.
It could prove that you need more, it could prove that that three-point
was
cut
correct.
is correct. That's
I would
correct.
like it either way, just so I can show my staff.
We really want to know as managers
Mm-hmm.
that what we've got is what we need to take care of patients. Our real goal is to take care of
That's
patients, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to be able to do that in the most appropriate, efficient, patient-focused way we can,
If we
right?
understand it, then it's easier for us to share.
That's exactly right.
We don't understand it when we have to make a cut or make a change,
Yep.
then it's hard to explain it to
Yep.
them.
And that's part of why we want that system to be validated and and be as accurate as possible because it will help us.
And if we have our own data, that's much more effective when we're trying to communicate and saying, oh yes, we were compared to like hospitals across the United States. You know, to be able to. That doesn't cut it,
So
yeah.
let me throw one, remember I talked about
Yeah.
you as a business unit manager,
Yes.
your job is to do what, really?
Manage.
Manage it to
Manage
reduce
the-
variability.
Mhm.
Manage it to performance and reduction, minimize variability. What's the assumption in an acuity-based system? So when I say, when we brought acuity on, this is one of the iterations we're going through right now in validation. Let's take an example of a discharge, okay? They say discharge in the system should take about half-hour time overall on average, okay? So on each one of your units, does that sound about right, or is it different? That's a good point. It varies. So here's my question. And this is something you have to ask yourself as a manager, and I ask myself as a manager what I do in my world. Is my process of discharge at 45 minutes optimized? Or are there opportunities to reduce variability within that discharge process to reduce it down as low as possible to get cycle time higher? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's an assumption, and this is part of that validation process, that all of our processes of care and documentation relative to what GE has in their research are equivalent based on efficiency. And that may or may not be the case, and that's nobody's fault. That's not a dig or a negative on anybody. This is part of our discovery process as an organization and as a learning and performance-based organization to kind of look at those things and say, okay, a Foley cath, they say takes X amount of time. Is that consistent? Is this really best practice, or do I have best practice because I'm actually, if it says it takes 15 minutes here and I'm doing it in 10, I'm rocking the house. Oh. And then you get that vice versa issue. So we gotta make sure in this data that we have all of those accuracies. Because your job around labor, if you're gonna go, and this is the same way for me in the ambulance world politically. If I went before county council and said I need 2 more ambulances, I better have my throughput processes optimized. I better be able to defend it this day and age, statistically, to say, yes, I've done everything I can as that leader to get variability out of my system, run cycle time where it should be strategically, but still balance everything else around quality of care, including engagement, safety, and everything else, to say that I'm as efficient and consistent from a variability standpoint as possible. If there's nothing more I can do, I must add labor because of these things. Make sense? But that's part of why we look at heterogeneity. Because you do need to understand statistically relative to your work standard, because your work standard may move in one way or the other. Okay? All right, so we've talked about the daily and hourly changes with respect to, and you can clearly see that you would not want to staff a Wednesday or a Thursday in the same way you do a Sunday and vice versa in this data. And this is workload relative to admissions and discharges. What do you see that's really interesting or consistent about Ninth Ortho?
They get discharges up.
Their discharges and admits are virtually in the same time frame. So what does that really mean for this unit? You got double the duty during that time frame during the day, hence why they have an admit discharge nurse. Is that one admit discharge nurse enough? Maybe, maybe not, depending on what's going on with that unit. But you could see, if you've only got, I think, what you tell me, Tracy, 9 hours on your admit discharge nurse, or who told me that? If you're disconnected and you've got 13 hours of total volumetric time around admits and discharges, because admits kind of start here and stop here, discharges start here and stop here, how are you going to cover that extra 4 hours? And understanding where it is so that you can plan for it in your staffing patterns. Okay? All right, so we got our demand. We know everything else. We want to know everything we ever want to know about demand. We're ready to go with building a labor budget. Okay? So there are 4 basic steps to building a labor budget. We're going to do some calculations, and I'm going to walk you through what each one of these means. First, we calculate the average daily census and occupancy rates. That's part of what we've kind of already fundamentally done. And why I say that around occupancy rate and the budgets, why are budgets built in a stepwise fashion the way they are here? So for instance, Ninth Ortho runs an ADC of 18, but they have a range of 4 nurses of 17 to 21 patients around the ratio. Why is that? It's the economy of scale. It's an economy of scale of incremental increase in revenue that's higher than the incremental increase in cost associated with generating the revenue. By that I mean, because of this ratio here, because at 16 or at 17, during the day they're running a 4.3 ratio, target 5. At 18 they run a 4.5, 19 4.8, 20 5.0, 21 5.3. So around that entire range, they've held labor constant. So labor fundamentally stayed the same. The incremental revenue associated with having those patients over the same amount of labor went up drastically, did it not? Typically in our environments, the incremental rate of revenue increase associated with the minimal amount of additional labor needed or no additional labor needed is very valuable to an organization from a contribution margin standpoint. That's part why those are written that way. Does that make sense to everybody? So you need to understand your occupancy rate and your ability to expand around your ratios. Because for instance, if you've got the ability to expand by an average of 5 patients or 2 patients per day in a med-surg unit very safely, and you're running a ratio that's 4.4, you expand by 2 overall, you've not come anywhere close to a 5, and you've incrementally really increased the amount of revenue associated with that. And ultimately, where does that hit? For you as a manager, it hits your contribution margin and how you manage your unit as a CEO. Okay? So we're going to calculate staffing requirements in FTEs. We're going to convert that staff in FTEs into actual positions, and at the end, you would calculate your overall labor cost, because ultimately you have 2 things in a budget. You have the hours, and you have your report to web that shows you your run on your dollars. And you have to make sure that both are connected. You've got enough hours, and that there's enough dollars associated with what you know your average hourly rates are in your nurse categories and your PST categories and your secretary, with all your diffs, and how much you expect in premium pay to run. Okay? Make sense? All right. So, let's talk about these items here. An ADC, like I said, is number of patient days divided by number of days in the year, i.e. number of patient days divided by 365. So in this instance with Ninth Ortho, you guys pull your budget out, go ahead and calculate that. If you don't have it, I'll let you cheat on Ninth Ortho's. And don't look at it. You don't want to calculate it. So you got total number of patient days of 6,714, right? And you divide that by whatever that may be by 365.